As you can see and as you heard, the title of my topic tonight, my talk tonight, is a Cradle of the National Pastime, New Jersey Baseball, 1855 to 1880. I think there are two important words in the title. The first is the word cradle. And I hasten to emphasize that a cradle is something very different from a birthplace. A cradle is a framework or a structure that helps someone or something move from infancy towards maturity. The second important word is the qualifier because I am not suggesting that New Jersey is the only cradle that organized baseball had. New Jersey was one such cradle, and certainly one of the, and I'm going to argue one of the most important, but there were multiple places that served in that cradle-like function for organized baseball as it got underway during the middle of the 19th century. We begin in 1855 because that's when the first New Jersey baseball teams took the field. But before I can talk about what happened in 1855, I need to go back a little bit earlier to give you some background and context. If baseball got started, organized baseball got started in New Jersey in 1855, that means it was still a relatively new game, less than 20 years old. Because as we know, we all know, in 1839 in Cooperstown, New York, this man, Abner Doubleday, invented baseball in Cooperstown, New York in 1839. We all know that, right? Now, what we know is that not only is there no evidence that Abner Doubleday invented baseball, there's no evidence Abner Doubleday ever played baseball. There's no evidence Abner Doubleday ever went to a baseball game. The truth is that games called baseball were played in this country well back into the 18th century, including in New Jersey. Just one example. This is a picture of a man by the name of John Ray Smith, which may be the earliest surviving photo of a baseball player, because in 1786, while a student at the College of New Jersey, today's Princeton University, he wrote in his diary that he had played baseball. And a year after that, in 1787, the faculty at Princeton passed a resolution forbidding the students from playing baseball on campus. And you don't forbid people from doing something unless they've already been doing it in the first place. Now, we know very little about 18th century baseball other than it was played. We know far more about what I would call organized baseball. Organized baseball gets its start in New York City in the 1830s and 1840s. And for that reason, historians today call it the New York game. And at the heart of early organized baseball was an institution called the baseball club. And baseball clubs of that era were very much like modern not-for-profit corporations. The first ones were formed again in New York City in the 1830s and 1840s. The most famous is this group. This is the Knickerbocker Baseball Club of New York, formed in September of 1845. Now, like Abner Doubleday, the Knickerbockers get credit for a number of things that they did not do. They were not the first baseball club. They did not invent baseball. And they most assuredly did not play in the first baseball game. But the Knickerbockers are justly famous because the game that they played, and above all, the game that they formalized in writing, is the direct ancestor of the game that is being played as we meet tonight throughout the United States and in some places around the world. We can trace modern baseball all the way back to the game that the Knickerbockers played. In a couple months, you will doubtless hear or read that on June 19th, 1846, at Elysian Fields in Hoboken, the Knickerbockers played the first match game. That is, the first game between two competing teams. Let me assure you that that was not the first match game. It is well documented that the Knickerbockers' opponent in this game, the New York club, played 3 games in October of 1845, a good 8 months earlier. This game, the New York club won by a score of 23-1, a game that lasted only 4 innings. And I'll say a little bit later about why it only lasted 4 innings. After this game, the Knickerbockers would not play another match game for almost 5 years. Why not? Well, they lost 23-1. Maybe they were bad losers. But that's not really the explanation. The reason is that these early baseball clubs were primarily social clubs who played baseball for exercise. And for them, the emphasis was upon what they called practice, but what we would call inter-squad games. Twice a week, the Knickerbockers would take the ferry to Elysian Fields in Hoboken, and each time they would divide up into 2 teams and play a game. And the next time they divide up again. There's no continuity in these games. They have no special significance. 5 years later, June 3rd, 1851, things start to change when the Knickerbockers play another match game. This time they play the Gotham Club of New York. This time they win. And less than 2 weeks later, they play a rematch and they win again. And competitive baseball is here, and it's here to stay. Now, from 1851 through 1854, there are basically 3 clubs playing competitive baseball: the Knickerbockers, the Gothams, and the Eagle Club of New York, all of them New York clubs. They play only 3 to 4 games a year. Most of their emphasis is still upon practice. They play a number of their games here at Elysian Fields in Hoboken. Now, this drawing is actually from a few years later. It's from 1857, but it gives you a sense of what early baseball games look like. And if you look behind the trees, you can see some sense of some sailboats and boats on the Hudson River. That's the situation through 1854. Now, in 1855, for reasons that we don't totally understand, baseball goes through a period of rapid growth and expansion. And nowhere is that growth more rapid and more extensive than it is in New Jersey, specifically in the northern part of New Jersey, north of the city of Trenton. In 1855, the New York game is played in only 3 places: in New York City, in Brooklyn, which was then an independent city, and New Jersey, northern New Jersey. New Jersey had 15 baseball teams in 1855. That's more than either Brooklyn or New York. Through the last season of peace, through the 1860 season, 177 baseball teams were formed in New Jersey in 21 different communities. Again, that's more than any place in the United States. In the city of Newark alone, 52 baseball clubs were formed. That's more than either Boston, Philadelphia, or Baltimore, all of them larger cities. How did this happen? Well, in 1855, there weren't a lot of ways you could learn about baseball. Obviously, there was no radio, there was no television, there were newspapers, but in 1855, newspapers paid very little attention to baseball. So the primary, if not the only way you could learn about baseball was direct personal contact. That is, you either played in a game, you saw a game, or you talked to somebody who had played or seen a game. The chances of that kind of direct personal contact are much higher if you have population density and a relatively mobile society. Both of those conditions exist in northern New Jersey. You have 3 major cities, including Newark, which was one of the largest cities in the United States. And it's a mobile society because of a sophisticated railroad system that exists in the northern part of the state, with its hub at the city of Newark. Almost without exception, those communities that had baseball clubs before the Civil War had a direct railroad connection to Newark. For example, Somerville, relatively rural in 1860, had a direct railroad connection to Newark and had a baseball club, whereas Paterson, 3rd largest city in New Jersey, did not have a direct railroad connection to Newark and had very limited baseball activity through 1860. So I think you can see how rapid the expansion was into New Jersey. If New Jersey really played that Cradle-like role, then we would also think that we would find in New Jersey some baseball firsts, or the better way to say it is probably earliest knowns. And that is, in fact, the case. In the late 1850s, what may be the earliest known instance of women playing baseball took place near Perth Amboy, New Jersey. The first interscholastic game in the United States, not intercollegiate, but interscholastic between 2 schools, took place in Bloomfield, New Jersey in 1858. And this, I think, is particularly interesting. This is an article I found in the Newark Daily Mercury after a long day of switching through very hard to read microfilm newspapers in Rutgers Alexandra Library. And as soon as I found it, I realized I had found something important. This is an article, very short article from the Newark Daily Mercury, October of 1855. 4 sentences describing to a baseball game of no particular significance. What's important is the insensitive word in parentheses, the word colored, where we would say black or African American, because it's the earliest known instance of blacks organizing to play baseball, not just in Newark, not just in New Jersey, but in the entire United States. Until I found this article, it was believed that the earliest known instance was 1859. So this moves it up 4 years. This is no small accomplishment by Newark's Black community. In 1855, Newark had an adult white population of about 23,000. They formed 5 baseball clubs. That same year, Newark had an adult Black male population of less than 600. They founded at least 1, possibly 2 baseball clubs. We don't know where the Union Club was from, but there's a reference here to the St. John's Club and their grounds being at the foot of Chestnut Street. That is definitely a Newark baseball field. So there is no question that the St. John's Club was a Newark club. And I think it's really interesting that Black youth in Newark got on the same field as their white counterparts. Now, that's what's going on in the northern part of the state. What's happening in the southern part of the state, south of Trenton? Well, that kind of reinforces the explanation for what happened in the northern part. Young men in northern New Jersey, when they were looking for a game to play, they gravitated towards New York City. In South Jersey, the same exercise would mean gravitating towards Philadelphia. This is a document, the bylaws and constitution of the Olympic Club of Philadelphia, which actually dates back earlier than the Knickerbockers. But if you look at the title of this booklet, a word is missing. It's the Olympic Ball Club, not the Olympic Baseball Club. That's not an accident. The Olympic Club and other clubs in Philadelphia play a very different game. It's one of the games that fits into the group of games called town ball. Now, town ball has become kind of a catch-all for anything that's not baseball, and it consists of a myriad of games that bear no relationship to one another. The Philadelphia version is relatively well documented, and so we're able to call it Philadelphia Town Ball, and it's very different from baseball. I've seen it recreated, and I've got a few pictures of it, and you might be interested in seeing what it looked like. What you see here, the man with his back to us is the catcher, and he's going to throw the ball to the pitcher. Standing in the middle of the screen to the left, the man in the white shirt is the batter. Well, you can't see them, I'm afraid, very clearly, but there are a series of stakes in a small circle. Those are the bases. There are 5 stakes, 5 bases in a relatively small circle. Now, there is no foul territory in Philadelphia Town Ball, so the batter can hit the ball any place he wants. When he does hit the ball, you see here the man on the left hand portion of the screen in the white shirt running around one of the stakes. That was the batter. There are 2 and only 2 possible outcomes to every at-bat in Philadelphia Town Ball. It results in either an out or a home run. No other alternatives. But another major difference, which is always one of the differences between baseball and other sports, you can retire somebody in Philadelphia Town Ball by hitting them with a thrown ball. And that's what's trying to happen here. Now, in Philadelphia Town Ball, there are 11 players on a team, and in each inning, every batter has to be retired for the side to be put out. So in other words, each team gets 11 outs per inning. With that, along with every at-bat reducing into a home run or an out, means that you get relatively high-scoring games. It's not uncommon to score 100 runs, and most games only last 2 innings. What's interesting here is that the same way the New York game moved from New York City into northern New Jersey, Philadelphia Town Ball moves into Camden. Camden forms a town ball club in 1857, 1858, but Philadelphia Town Ball doesn't go any further than that. And there are really 2 reasons for that. South Jersey was relatively sparsely populated, and there was no centralized railroad system to have that kind of direct personal contact that we had in the northern part of the state. What's it like being a member of one of these early pre-Civil War baseball clubs? And I said earlier that they're not unlike the modern not-for-profit corporation. So, of course, you have to have a constitution and bylaws. This is the front cover of the Constitution and bylaws of the Pioneer Club of Jersey City, formed in 1855. Unfortunately, that document is in a private collection, and I've never been able to see what's inside it. However, another club, the Hamilton Club of Jersey City, formed in 1857, we're fortunate that their bylaws, their constitution, and indeed their minute book survive. They're in the Baseball Hall of Fame library in Cooperstown, and they open a window for us on what it was like to be part of an antebellum baseball club. 3 things that I want to mention. If you decided that you wanted to become a member of the Hamilton Club, you couldn't just show up. You had to be nominated by another member, and you would be nominated at one meeting, and then your nomination would be referred to the Committee on Inquiry, who would evaluate you and see whether or not you were qualified for membership. And if they thought you were qualified for membership, they would bring your nomination to the next membership meeting for a vote. Voting was done anonymously. White balls for yes, black balls for no. Anybody who receives 3 or more negative votes is rejected. Now, when I say they're evaluating your qualifications, it has nothing to do with your ability to hit, run, and throw. It has everything to do with your social acceptability. These are still primarily social clubs. And at one meeting in 1858, 4 young men are brought forward for election. 2 of them pass unanimously. 1 passes with 1 negative vote. But an unfortunate young man by the name of Freeman A. Smith gets 6 negative votes, and his nomination is rejected. It's a little hard to understand why that happened, because he was the son of a prominent Jersey City businessman. He went on to be a prominent Jersey City businessman in his own right, but somehow he managed to offend this group of young men who were not particularly unique in their own. If, unlike Mr. Smith, you were fortunate enough to be accepted for membership, then you had to follow all of the bylaws and requirements of the club. Now, it's interesting, if this wasn't a gentleman's club, it was at least a group of men who aspired to be gentlemen. But they and their counterparts in these other clubs did not always behave as gentlemen. And so therefore, every club had a series of fines, ranging from 5 cents to 25 cents. Fines for things like arguing with the umpire, using profanity, and my favorite, anticipating an umpire's call before he made it. If I'd been around then, I would have been fined a quarter on more than one occasion. Final thing I want to say about the Hamilton Club, their bylaws go into great detail into how practice is organized, the practice games, what days they're played on, how the teams are chosen, who the umpire is going to be, the rules, everything. Their bylaws don't say a word about how match games are organized. That is, games with other teams. And this is, again, a reflection of the fact that it's still primarily a social game, and the emphasis is upon these inter-squad games. However, that is about to change, because in February of 1860, a new club is formed in Newark, the Eureka Baseball Club. This picture was taken in the mid-1860s. It's one of the oldest known surviving photos of a New Jersey baseball club. When it came to social credentials, the members of the Eureka Club didn't have to take a back seat to anybody. The founding president of the Eureka Club, a man by the name of Edward Pennington, was not only a direct descendant of one of Newark's founding families, both his father and his grandfather had been governors of New Jersey. So no lack of social standing. But that's not why they came together. They came together to compete, and not just in New Jersey, but throughout the United States or the baseball world as it existed then. And they will do just that. They become the premier New Jersey baseball team of the Civil War years, and in 1865, they will on 2 occasions become 1 heartbreaking run short of beating the Atlantic Baseball Club of Brooklyn, the best team in the country. Now, the Eureka play their first season in 1860. And like most new clubs, they get off to a slow start. Their first game is with the Hamilton Club. They lose to the Hamilton Club, who were no great shakes on the field. But then they start to improve, and they finish the season with a winning record. And I'm sure they were looking forward with a great deal of anticipation of what was going to happen to baseball during the 1861 season. But before we talk about what happened in 1861, I want to talk a little bit about what baseball was like in the 1860s. Specifically, I want to talk about what baseball was like in 1864, how the game was played. Now, there are a number of ways you can learn about 19th century baseball. You can attend a talk like this, you can read any one of a number of books about it, or you can actually watch 19th century baseball being played today. It's called vintage baseball, and there are 4 vintage baseball teams in New Jersey. That's one of them. That's my team, the Flemington Nishannick. We're the 2nd oldest baseball team in the state. That picture was taken a number of years ago at a festival in Gettysburg. I'm the scorekeeper, and it's not a correct term historically, but I'm effectively the manager. I gave out a few of our brochures. If you'd like one, there's some more over there. I'd urge you to take one We play pretty much every weekend from April until September up and down the East Coast. We play this Saturday in Morristown, New Jersey. One game of note in South Jersey. Second weekend in September, we'll be in Delanco, New Jersey, helping that community celebrate the centennial of the game that Babe Ruth played there and hit a home run. Even if you only see a couple innings, I think you'll enjoy it and you'll learn about what baseball was like during the 1860s. If you go to a vintage baseball game, what will you recognize and what won't you recognize? First, three things that you will recognize. There will be 9 players on a team. They will play pretty much the same positions they play today. The game will last 9 innings, and it will be won by the team that scores the most runs. But those last 2 things have only recently been formalized. If you remember that Knickerbocker score sheet, they only played 4 innings. The reason is the Knickerbockers played a game that went to the first team to score 21 runs. And if it only took 4 innings, the game only lasted 4 innings. That's changed by now. The other difference is that there was a big debate in 1857 about 7 innings versus 9 innings before 9 innings finally wins. So if you enjoy the 3 to 3.5 hour marathons that make up Major League Baseball today, at least before the pitch clock, you know who you have to thank for it. So those are some things you would recognize. But what would be the things that you wouldn't recognize? Well, we'll start with the pitcher. This is Dave Illinois Harris, one of the pitchers for the Neshannock. You'll notice a couple of important differences. He's throwing the ball underhanded. He is standing on a flat surface, not on an elevated pitcher's mound. And while you can't see it here, he is only about 40 feet away from home plate, not 60 feet 6 inches. He's pitching a ball that looks like this. This is a replica of an 1864 baseball. I'm going to pass it around with a modern baseball, and you can get a sense of the difference. I think you will find that the 1864 ball is a little bigger and a little softer. He is pitching the ball towards home plate, where a man will be standing holding a bat. It looks like this, which I'm also going to pass around. The man standing at the plate, however, is not called the batter. He's called the striker. He is not standing in the batter's box. He's standing on the striker's line, or he is straddling the striker's line. Obviously, his job is to hit the ball. And here, you've got a picture of a tournament a number of years ago near Rochester, New York. The striker is Mark Gaslight Granieri of the Neshannock. You may not be able to see it, but he's straddling a line, the striker's line. Now, we don't start an inning in vintage baseball with that time-old expression, batter up. We start with striker to the line, please. Now, the striker is going to hit the ball into the field, and the fielders are all going to try to field the ball like these players are in this picture, and they're going to try to field it with a 19th century baseball glove, which looks something like this. It's called a hand. There are no gloves in 19th century baseball. And the only equipment, quite frankly, are bats, balls, and bases. That's it. Now, another major difference. Any batted ball caught, fair or foul, caught on a bounce is an out. Trust me, it's a major difference. And going to one of our games, you are most likely going to see this man. This is Sam Bernstein, our umpire, and you'll see him standing to the left or right of home plate. And yes, that's the way he dresses. That's the way umpires dressed in the 1860s. The umpire has 2 primary responsibilities. He is to call fair and foul balls, and he is to call balls and strikes. Strikes were introduced in the late 1850s to give the batter or striker some incentive to swing at a pitch. However, foul balls are not strikes. Foul balls will not be strikes until early in the 20th century. Balls are also very different. Balls were introduced for the 1864 season, but it only took 3 balls for a walk. And on a walk, all runners advance regardless of what base they are on. So for example, if a runner is on third and the striker walks, the runner on third scores. I can't prove it, but I believe it's the origin of the expression, a walk is as good as a hit. A couple of other major differences. The umpire does not have to call every pitch. He can say, pitch not called. And the striker and the pitcher are both entitled to a warning. So if the first pitch is right down the center of the plate and the striker doesn't swing, the umpire will not say strike one. He'll say warning to the striker. The last thing that I will mention that you will notice about the umpire is that he will never go on to the field of play. His primary jobs are to call balls and strikes and fair and foul balls. He is not supposed to call plays on the bases. Those are supposed to be called by the players, which means that if you're a runner and you're out, you're supposed to admit that you're out. And if you're a fielder and the runner is safe, you're supposed to admit that he's safe. And if you don't agree, then you can ask the umpire for judgment. Now, I would say that in a typical vintage baseball game, the umpire is asked for judgment maybe 1 or 2 times in the course of a game. It works remarkably well, and it's a last vestige of the gentlemanly nature of the game. Last difference I want to talk about between baseball then and baseball now is the schedule. In those days, match play, that is competitive play, did not begin until June, but it lasted until Thanksgiving, or at least as long as the weather permitted. So the first national holiday associated with baseball is not the 4th of July, but Thanksgiving. April is given to getting organized. And so in April of 1861, our friends from the Hamilton Club gather at the U.S. Hotel in Jersey City to begin planning for the upcoming season. They discuss what days of the week they're going to practice, how many games they're going to play, where they're going to practice, where they're going to play. They don't agree on any of this. The Hamilton Club's a very contentious group of people. So they adjourn without resolving anything. But it doesn't matter because this is literally the last entry in the Hamilton Club's minute book. Because the next day, the Confederates attack Fort Sumter, the Civil War is underway, the Hamilton Club goes out of existence, never to be heard from again. The contemporary media wanted its readers to believe that as soon as they heard about the attack on Fort Sumter, baseball players threw down their bats and balls and ran off to enlist in the Union Army. This reaches the peak of absurdity where one of the New York sporting newspapers says that there's talk of forming a baseball regiment, a regiment made up only of baseball players. There's only one potential problem, which is that so many of them are already in the Army. Well, none of that is true. Some of you may be familiar with this book by J. Matthew Gallman, Defining Duty in the Civil War. He argues very convincingly that service in the Union military was very much a matter of choice. And if you wanted to serve, that was well and good. If you chose not to serve, that was also accepted, and you received very little abuse about it. So that the Civil War was the last great volunteers' war. And there's pretty good evidence to back that up. In New Jersey, over 70,000 men served in the Union military. Less than 1,000 of them were drafted. So most of them were volunteers. And it's more than fair to say that the majority of baseball players, especially the best baseball players, did not volunteer and did not serve. Some did, however, and a small number were killed. Some of them had some interesting experiences, including 2 from Camden, New Jersey, both of whom became prisoners of war, one of whom without even being in the military. The first one is this man. This is Frank Knight, who played for the Camden Baseball Club. He was a very good baseball player. He joined the Union Army right after the outbreak of the war, served in the 3rd New Jersey, was taken prisoner at Gaines Mill during the Peninsula Campaign, taken prisoner supposedly only because he refused to leave one of his fellow soldiers who was also a fellow teammate who had been mortally wounded. He was exchanged after that, became a lieutenant colonel in the 24th New Jersey, a 9-month regiment whose service ended in June of 1863. Even more unusual is the experience of a man named Lawrence Fissler. Now, Lawrence Fissler was also from Camden. His older brother, Weston, who I'll talk about a little bit later, was one of the great baseball players of the 1860s. Lawrence's skills were in another area. His skills were as a photographer. He played for the Camden Club. And in early June of 1863, he boarded a boat that he thought was going to take him to China to advance his photography career. Unfortunately for him, the boat ran into the Alabama, the Confederate raider, which took their ship captive and took Fissler captive as well. And he spent about 60 days on that ship as a prisoner until they finally decided to let him go and take another ship that was leaving someplace in the Caribbean for New York. But before he could go, he had to sign a statement that he was a prisoner of war and it could not serve in the Union Army unless he had been properly exchanged, even though he had never been in the military. There were some New Jersey baseball players who served in the military. Now, of course, a lot of baseball was played by Union troops during the Civil War. Most of it was played well behind battle lines. There is, however, a famous story from Texas of some Union troops who were foolish enough to play a game right up against the Confederate lines. Confederates took exception to this and launched a surprise attack. The Union troops beat the attack back without any difficulty, but as one of the soldiers lamented in a letter home to his family, not only was our center fielder taken prisoner, we lost the only baseball in our possession. Now, New Jersey troops, as I said, they played a lot of baseball, but not in those kind of conditions. This is a rough box score of a game played in late April, early May of 1863, somewhere in Virginia, between the junior officers and senior NCOs of the 11th New Jersey. A game between two sides, one captained by Captain Martin and one captained by Captain Logan. Captain Martin's team won relatively easily. About 2 months later, on the second day at Gettysburg, the 11th New Jersey will be in the ultimate wrong place at the wrong time and suffer horrific losses. The regiment goes through 3 commanding officers in a period of 15 minutes. And all of the officers, captain and below, will either be killed or wounded, including Captains Martin and Logan. Now, the only reason that we have this box score is that a man in the regiment by the name of Thomas Marbiger, who became the regimental historian and in the 1890s wrote a history of the regiment, included this box score with very little explanation. And it seems to me that the reason he did it at this point, baseball is firmly the national pastime. He wanted to remember these young men in their youth playing the national game. There is one instance where baseball is used to support the Union cause. And that's in June of 1864. The Great Central Fair is held in Philadelphia. A number of these fairs were held throughout the North. They were held for the benefit of the United States Sanitary Commission, sort of a combination of the Red Cross and the USO. When this fair was scheduled for June of 1864, a man by the name of Henry Chadwick, known as the father of baseball, longtime baseball sports writer, came up with the idea that we should have a series of baseball games and charge admission, which wasn't the norm at the time, and then we'd use the proceeds to also benefit the Sanitary Commission. Unfortunately, all but one of the games were rained out. The one game that was played, though, was an all-star game, or the equivalent of an all-star game, between a team from New Jersey and a team from Pennsylvania. And I'm pleased to tell you that the team from New Jersey won. Playing on the New Jersey team were Mr. Knight from the Camden Club, also Mr. Fissler, the Weston Fissler. But more note historically is a man by the name of Baird, who played for the New Jersey team, because he was from the Bridgeton Club. The Bridgeton Club was formed in the fall of 1863. It's, as far as we know, the earliest baseball club formed in South Jersey. And it's kind of symbolic because what happens after the war is that baseball will then spread throughout the rest of the 21 counties of New Jersey. And by 1870, every county is home to multiple baseball teams. Now, as we know, the war ends in April of 1865, just in time for the baseball season. Now, baseball no longer needs that cradle-like role that New Jersey has played. So what's going to happen with baseball in New Jersey? And is there a role for baseball in New Jersey? Well, what's going to happen is the game is going to spread throughout the state, as I mentioned. This is a picture from about the end of the war of 2 unidentified men from Hackettstown, New Jersey. And it just kind of symbolizes how you get to the point where almost every town has a team. Some have more than one. That's what will happen in New Jersey. But what's happening nationally is baseball is becoming more and more competitive. It's becoming more and more professional. This is just one symbol of this. This picture is actually out here in the exhibition. It's a picture of a famous baseball game played in Philadelphia in 1866 between the Athletic Club of Philadelphia, not the Philadelphia Athletics, but that's where the name comes from, and the Atlantic Baseball Club of Brooklyn, the 2 best teams in the country in 1866. One of the things that's important to note about this, the field is enclosed by a fence. There's only one reason you do that, which is so you can charge admission. There are grandstands, there are seats here. So, baseball is becoming more and more professional. Okay, well, what's New Jersey's role in that? New Jersey cannot support a professional baseball team. So many other places are having trouble. Well, there is a role for New Jersey, and I think it's symbolized by this picture. This is a picture of the 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings. Now, like Abner Doubleday and the Knickerbocker Club, the Red Stockings get credit for things they did not do. They were not the first all-paid baseball club. They are not the ancestors of today's Cincinnati Reds. But the Red Stockings are also justly famous because they are the ones who made baseball a popular sport nationwide. Because in 1869, they went on a transcontinental tour, literally from the East Coast to the West Coast, which means that baseball fans in the Philadelphia area and baseball fans in the San Francisco area could both say that they had seen the best team in the country play in person. Think about that. It's going to be a long time before anybody can say that again. Now, how do I know the Red Stockings were the best team in the country? Well, in 1869, they played 57 match games, and they won all 57 of them. A year later, they will win 18 more consecutive games before they finally are decided by the Atlantic Club of Brooklyn in what some historians consider the greatest game ever played. What's the New Jersey connection? Well, on the right-hand column, the top two men are Andy Jackson Leonard and Charles Sweezy. Those are both New Jersey baseball players. They grew up in Newark, learned how to play baseball in Newark, played for the Irvington Club, one of New Jersey's top clubs, before advancing to the professional level. New Jersey's role is as a cradle of Major League Baseball talent. Weston Fissler is another example of that. He had a long baseball career. He played his last season in 1876, which coincidentally was the first year of the National League. National League is the oldest surviving professional sports league in the world. Fissler played in the first game. He has the distinction of having scored the first earned run in National League history. Even a better example of that cradle-like role is this man. This is Mike King Kelly from Paterson, New Jersey, considered by some to be the greatest player of the 19th century, a member of the Hall of Fame. Not only was he baseball's highest paid player, he also earned just as much money from endorsements and the like. He was Major League Baseball's first rock star personality. And it is a direct link from this Mike to this Mike, Mike Trout from South Jersey, who, if money means anything, is one of the greatest players in baseball today. New Jersey was a very important part of early baseball, and baseball has been an important part of New Jersey ever since. Thank you very much.